Today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new KeyLab Essentials 49 Mark III from Arturia. Now the Mark III is obviously the upgrade to the Mark II, and there's a couple of differences I want to go through with you straight away. The first big notice I want to get out of the way right now is the performance pads. They're much bigger, and the old ones were actually taken from the KeyLab, looking exactly the same, but these have a brand new feel to them, and being much bigger, the surface area is fantastic. Next is the door controls, and they have changed as well, giving you things with save, quantize, undo, and redo. We've got loop, we've got rewind, fast forward, tempo, stop, play, record, and tap. Now the great thing about the Arturia KeyLabs, whether you've got the KeyLab or the KeyLab Essentials, is how they integrate with the digital audio workstation. I use Logic Pro, but other people use different ones like Bitwig, Ableton, and lots others. We'll get into using this with a digital audio workstation in a moment. A nice little change with the coloring is actually the encoders and the faders. They were black and they're now white if you get the white one, and of course this is also available as a black edition as well. But the big change is the one I've been holding back on, which is the display. It's a 2.5-inch LCD display with 4 contextual buttons underneath and a jog wheel which you can click as well. And what's really clever is the way they've used this to give you instant feedback about what you're doing. For example, let me just move this mod wheel. Straight away you can actually see it moving up and down with the numbers, and it's really clear. If we go into program, you can actually change which door you're using, or we can have a user as well. We can go back to Arturia, so if you use Arturia software, it just picks it up straight away. And again, I'm going to show you that in a moment. If I was to hit one of the pads, so if you tap it here, the one thing about these pads is they are so sensitive, and that's a really good thing. Some pads, when you press them so lightly, they don't register it. These do, and they are really good, and I'll show you how sensitive that is when we get into the DAW. Next door to the encoders and the sliders, which we have 9 of, we have a couple of things where we can control the keyboard. So we have hold, chord, scale, and arp. On the far left hand side, we have bank, MIDI channel, transpose up and down, and octave up and down as well. And the keys themselves are full size, and they just feel great because they've come from Arturia. The keybed in the Essentials has never been the same as the keybed in the KeyLab, which is their flagship MIDI controller, but the sensitivity is fantastic at its price point. The Essentials is made out of plastic, whereas the KeyLab is made out of aluminium, and there is wood detail on both, but this is actually being made out of 40% recycled plastic. The packaging it comes in is 100% recycled, and the material's carbon impact is 18% less than the Mark II. Now with all the Essentials, you've been able to connect to a digital audio workstation, but with the Mark III, it's got 5 dedicated scripts for different DAWs. I've already downloaded the script for Logic Pro and put it in this and updated the firmware, so it works with the software it comes with, things like Analog Lab 5 and all the different softwares that Arturia sell. I myself have got things like Pigments, I've got the V collection because I love them. I think they're fantastic pieces of kit. Now the nice thing with the pads as well is an upgrade for this is you can see it says bank. So if I actually press these, you can see it says pads 1 to 8. If I click on bank, it'll actually say bank B, and we've got pads 1 to 8, but we're on a different bank. So you've actually got the equivalent of 16 pads if you need them. And talking about the software you get with this keyboard, this is the biggest bundle of software that Arturia have given with a keyboard. So with this keyboard, if you buy it, you get Analog Lab 5, Ableton Live Lite, Native Instruments The Gentleman, UVI's Model D, a 2-month subscription to Loop Cloud, and a melodic subscription, which actually has lessons to help you build your confidence with playing with this keyboard. Now let's have a look at it on the back, because there is one big change which I was a bit worried about, but it's okay. On the back of this keyboard you can actually see there are 3 inputs, whereas on the KeyLab Mark II there was 4 inputs. Now the big change is USB. It's now USB-C, and in the box you will actually get one of these. This is USB-C to USB-A. Now I only use USB-C to C, so I've used the USB-C to C cable I've got with the Arturia audio interface I have. So this isn't the cable you're going to get this one, which is a white one. It's got a little right angle on it, which is really nice, so you can actually use that and plug it straight in. But it is USB-A on the other end. I really would like to see 2 cables, one USB-C to A and a USB-C to C. We have our MIDI out, which is 5 pinned in, and you also have control, where you can plug in a sustain pedal or an expression pedal. But if you're familiar with the Essentials Mark II, you'll notice there's something missing, and that is the optional DC power. Now I was a bit panicky about this. It was like, well, how do I plug this in if I'm going to be using this with something like an iPad? But actually, the USB Type-C can deliver the power as well. So you don't have to worry about an optional DC power supply. It actually makes it easier. You've actually got one less thing to carry, and then you don't have to worry about finding a plug. It'll just plug straight in to a computer or even an iPad. So one of the really nice things, and another reason why I like Arturia quite a lot, is the way they communicate from the physical devices onto your computer. The first one is actually the Midi controller. So Midi Control Center with Arturia, when you plug in a keyboard, it kind of just recognizes it. It shows every device that Arturia sells. I don't own all of these, don't worry. But it says a KeyLab Essential 3 is connected, and it has this great graphical representation of it. It's fantastic. Then you've got device memories, and you can see there's actually 6 user memories, and you can even have templates as well. I've just got it on the Arturia read-only one, and then of course if we go to program, you can change it over to DAW, and that's read-only as well. Or you can actually say, I've got a user and you want to have very specific CC numbers. What's really cool is you can actually click on each thing. So I can click on a pad, and then I can tell it what I want it to do, what color it is, and it can actually personalize this if I want to. When they're on read-only, of course, it's only going to be read-only. I can't write to it. You'd have to do it on one of the users. But what's really clever is the personalization of this. Now, there's a couple of different things you can do with this. First and foremost, of course, it is a MIDI controller. This is a velocity-sensitive keyboard. These are velocity-sensitive and pressure-sensitive pads. So let's dive into one of the pieces of the software that I absolutely love that you get with this, which is Analog Lab 5. Now, you can use Analog Lab 5 as a standalone, or you can use it inside a digital audio workstation. So for the first part of this, we're just going to use it on its own. So welcome to Analog Lab 5. Now, the great thing about this is that the whole point of a KeyLab, whether you've got the Essentials or the normal KeyLab, is you have to use the mouse or the keyboard too much. You can actually use your keyboard, if that makes sense. So what we can do is we can use this big jog wheel here and just start scrolling, and this will actually throw us through all the presets from A to Z or 0 to Z, and we can just scroll through, give it a click on that preset. Let's go for another one and scroll down. And we're not even onto A yet, we're still in the numbers, there we go. There's about 10,000 presets I've got in here at the moment because I've already bought a couple of things from Arturia as well, and it all goes into Analog Lab. Think of Analog Lab a little bit like the TV guide to audio synthesizers. So when you're on the home page, you've got things like types, instruments, you can discover more sounds. So if we wanted to do it by instrument, for example, we could actually go to here and go show all and have a look here. We've got ones that are downloaded, ones that come with Analog Lab 5, and we can get rid of the keyboard and even the controls and just have the library on the screen. The alternative way, as I say, is just start scrolling, and you can see it goes from A to Z, and we can actually whittle it down. So I've just collected the ARP 2600. We've now got 611 presets to go through. And what you can do is you can even edit that preset. So let's go to this one, which is low strings. And you can see what it's been using here. So of course it's using the ARP, and it can open it up, and we can actually see it here. Now, if you own the ARP, for example, or it comes with a package, you can access this and edit whatever you like. You can click back at the top here, we can go edit preset, and you can see the parts. There's only one part here. We can add a second instrument on here to make a multi, and you've got your effects, and then you've got your master. So if we click open on here, you can see I can get into this, and it's quite intense just for one synthesizer. We should get rid of that, and let's go for a different style. For example, we could say, well, I want something that has experimental, and it's showing 1756. Let's go for processed. Now we're down to 275, and let's go with something that's deep. There we go, we got 42. Show the results, let's have a look. Let's edit that preset there from the CMI. So if you have a look at the CMI, it's there. We can even go into the screen and show what it looks like. And that's really cool. Now, what's really, really cool about, obviously, the KeyLabs, if we open the controls here, it tells us what those controls are doing. So we've got the 9 faders and we've got the 9 encoders. So, of course, as I move this now, you can actually see it on the screen there. It's moving the first one here, which is the filter. We can get really nuts and change everything. And the last one here is the master level, and this one's not being used for anything, but this last encoder is the master volume. we've got our unique sound there. Of course, it's going to do that because we've got lots of reverb on there. So as you can see very quickly, I can control things without having to reach for the mouse. I can use the encoders and the sliders here really easily. Now that's all well and good, but the biggest way this comes into its own is when you go into a DAW. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up Logic Pro and I'm going to show you how this works. Now right out the bat, when we're setting up a brand new track, you can see we can select our first instrument for software instruments. So I'm going to go to Instruments, we've got Arturia here, and you can see all the different ones that are there that I've got through Analog Lab 4, Analog Lab 5, the collection. I've got things like pigments. So let's stick with 5 right now and just pick a stereo track. And we'll hit create. Now, there's two ways we can do this. We can actually change this over. So the program is actually in Arturia and then it just stays in Arturia. We go to program and instantly it says instrument 1, Analog Lab 5, because it's not controlling Analog Lab, it's actually controlling Logic. Let's just dive over to Arturia and what we can do is we can start scrolling inside Logic. So let's grab this one, which is a nice EP, and that's fine. And then what I can do is if I minimize this, that's there now, that's actually in Analog Lab, that's fine. It's called Untitled at the moment. We go to Program, you can see it's called Untitled here, and it's actually controlling Logic. So these now come into play. We've got Save, Quantize, Undo, Redo, we've got all these different ones as well. So if I hit record, so I've just recorded a 2-bar loop, nice and simple. You can see it's put the Midi in there straight away. And I use these controllers, that's fine. Now it's still got it selected, so I can just hit quantize. And what it'll do is we'll actually quantize it, which is fantastic. I can hit save, it's going to save it and ask me what you want to name the project. We've got undo and redo, so let's undo that recording. I can go, no, actually I want it back, hit redo, and you've got all these different controls. I can move forward in the track, I can move back in the track. You've got your metronome here, and you've also got tap tempo. And it says, would you like to enable tap tempo when I click it? So you can say yes. Obviously I don't want to do that right now. As I start to add more things, and I'm going to do that now, I'm just going to duplicate this track, and I'm going to pick something different. So in order to pick something different, I'm going to go back over to Arturia Lab and just start scrolling again. So let's go over to here. And it's still called it Untitled. So what I can do is, let's just rename these right now. So we'll call that EP Piano. And we'll call this one Pad. And as soon as I hit enter, it's changed it on the screen. So if I scroll between the two, you can now see it's changing the different track. This is fab. I'm really in control of what I'm doing here, and I don't have to play around with the keyboard or the mouse too much. Now I've just added the drummer on here, so let's go back. Good old Kyle is back with us. So I can actually play any of these here. However, we've got these lovely pads, and these pads are nice and big, as I said before, really, really easy to use. They're really sensitive. I really like them a lot, and because of their size, I actually like them a little bit more than the normal KeyLab ones. Now, the other thing you may notice on the screen is you can see it says SoCal, Drum Kit Designer Stereo, and I've got these buttons have come alive now. So I can actually click this, and this will go into the settings of that drum kit for me on Logic. So I don't even have to go into clicking things on the screen. I can just press this button and you can see what kind of drum kit it is. I can mute it, I can solo it. So if I solo it, it instantly mutes all the other tracks, and obviously the obvious for if I mute it. This just gives me a lot more control, and I just think it's fantastic. Now in Analog Lab right now, I've got this set up to control Logic, but you can see it's not moving the information that's there because it's saying P1 effects for dry stroke wet. And that's Logic, it's actually controlling the effects on Logic. If I go back to Program and go back to Arturia, it's now controlling the stuff that's on Arturia as opposed to Logic. And this works for most of the DAWs as well, so you can control things here without having to change the screen. Maybe I want to keep what's going on in Analog Lab 5 on the screen, but then also I want to control Logic here on the controllers, on the faders and the encoders. So this is the American Grand. Now I don't have a sustain pedal actually plugged into this keyboard right now, and the hold actually doesn't hold every single note. see that you didn't hear the C there? It turned those off as I pressed a new key. So as you let go, it keeps the sustain for those notes, but then when you press a new one, it takes them off again. This is a really clever way of actually having a sustain there without having a sustain pedal, because if you had a normal sustain pedal and hold it down, you'd hear every note. So the hold option is really intuitive. You can just turn it off. The chord option, when you press it, actually tells you what chord is being played. So we've got a major triad. And you hold it down and you can create a chord, so we can actually scroll this at all. So let's go sus2, sus4, major 7th, nice. Let's use that. Very jazzy. The arpeggiator, if you hold this down, you get a lot of information. So we've got the arp, the divide, the mode of the gate, and if we go across, there's actually 2 pages. There's a swing, there's a sync, there's rate and octave as well. So there's loads there. And then you've also got scale, and you can actually have it on chromatic scale, or we can actually change this so we can turn certain notes off so you don't make a mistake. So now I'll put it in minor. I can't play a major note. Let's change it over to major. Really clever. We've got a Dorian scale here. So what do we have here? The KeyLab Essential Mark III is a focused, accessible and fun MIDI controller where you can increase your workflow because of the buttons they've put in place. Designed around using with a DAW and pairing the hardware with the software and the MIDI management, this keyboard is fab. As I said to you before, I actually prefer the pads on this than the KeyLab 49 Mark II, controlling the DAW with the most vital buttons at your fingertips and with some real expressive options, things like the hold, the chord, the scale and the arp. You can start making some real creative choices really quickly. And that's just the keyboard. Add the software on top of that and you've got the most expressive way to get going with music than ever before. Design-wise, it's light enough to carry around. In fact, if I was going to a gig, I'd probably take the KeyLab Essential over the normal KeyLab just from weight alone. It's been eco-designed with at least 40% recycled plastic, and it's clean and it's simple and it's quite a reassuring piece of kit. You'll soon realize you're getting an absolute stellar keyboard. If you're coming from the Mark II and looking at the Mark III, I do actually think it's worth it. USB-C, bigger pads, and this display alone with the 4 buttons makes things so easy to understand what you're doing, whether you're using Analog Lab, Arturia's Pigments, any of their collections, or using it in a DAW, where it's really at home. This could slot into most people's home studios straight away and actually kind of take over as the main central hub for where you control your DAW. Use the sliders and encoders to control different things from different areas. If you've never played with an Arturia KeyLab before, I would highly recommend start with the Essential. From the price point difference between the Essential KeyLab to the normal KeyLab, this thing is going to get a lot of attention. I'd like to thank Arturia for sending this out to me and sending it out a little bit early so I can have a play with it and understand it. And of course, as normal, I've left links in the description box if you want to go and pick one of them up. It's on my Throne page, which if you don't know what that is, that's my one-stop place where I've reviewed everything, and all you've got to do is click the link and it'll take you to the best places to go and purchase one of these. Now this is the KeyLab Essentials 49 Mark III, but if you need something a little bit smaller, you might want to check out their Mini Lab 3, which is this, and I did a video all about it, and it's right here.